Have you been asking yourself, is it time to leave this job? Let's talk about the signs that your workplace may be holding you back instead of lifting you up. But before I get into it, if you like my content, please remember to hit the like button. And if you have not subscribed, I'll ask that you do so because doing so helps me continue to bring content to you like this. And I really enjoy doing that. So let's get into it. These signs that your workplace might be holding you back instead of lifting you up. Well, first of all, if you're working in a toxic environment, and in case you don't know what that is, let me just give you an idea. It's where you're dealing with constant drama, favoritism, or bullying. Your boss might be abusive, unsupportive, or he might just be someone who micromanages your every move. The culture promotes fear instead of growth. If that's what's going on, it's time to ask yourself if this place deserves your energy. And right now, bad managers are feeling empowered. I'll be the first to tell you that. With the world as it is right now, people feel okay to be the worst version of themselves. And it's really interesting to watch. I see it even, in courts. It's people feel like it's okay to be mean, to be just not very nice people. So there's a lot of that going on right now. And it would not surprise me if you are experiencing that. You're not alone. Another indicator that it might be time to move on is if you're working someplace where there is no growth, no opportunities for growth, or when promotions, raises, and opportunities are always next year. I'll get to you next year. But then they never come. In other words, it's a dead end. When the person reporting to you makes more money than you, or people who have been there not as long as you've been there are making more money, that's just unfair. And I still don't know why people think it's okay to do that. But those are indicators that, it might be time to just look elsewhere because why would that be okay? Another thing, if you're experiencing poor work-life balance, if you're burned out, constantly exhausted, or can't unplug, the job is taking more than it's giving. It's hard to even enjoy friends and family because it's always stressful at work. You can't stop talking about work. You go, to the extent that you find time to spend time with family and friends, and you still are talking about work. It just is on your mind constantly. So even if you're not physically at the job, it's still on your mind. It's taking up all this space, rent-free in your head. And that's an indication that it might be time to move on. If there are unfair or illegal practices at your workplace, now that's a huge one. If there's discrimination or retaliation or harassment with no accountability, people are just letting people get away with any and everything. That's not just wrong, it's dangerous. Of course, this is my world. I settled a case recently where the manager was so bad. He was really hateful. So much so, he'd been there for a while, so he was really comfortable. So he would watch television at work and would watch all these really hateful videos in front of the employees and let them know that that was his position, that he agreed with what they were showing in the videos. They were expressing in the shows, they were expressing their views, and they were not very nice views. And he made it very clear that he supported that. Now, he eventually fired my client, and that's when he hired me. And I told my client, I said, he's going to get fired. Just, wait and see. And like I've said in other videos, my clients always have a really difficult time believing me when I tell them they're going to get theirs in the end. Long story short, as soon as the litigation ended, they fired this manager. No, actually, I take it back. It was probably a few months after the litigation ended and they fired him. But nonetheless, it was within the year. And my client called me and said, you were right. they fired him, and because of his previous coworkers kept in touch with him and let him know that he'd been finally fired. And he had been the source. This manager had been the reason why a lot of people ended up leaving. And I find this to be the case very often. It's always this bad manager that, for whatever reason, companies tend to hold on to. And but in the end, they get theirs, and this man got his. And the greatest part about it is that I am now friends with my client, and now we still have lunch just as friends. And so that's one of the best parts of my job. Anyway, another indicator that it might be time to move on is when there's a lack of respect at your job. If your contributions are ignored or dismissed, that's a signal to find a place that values you. And then, credit stealing. I see this a lot with, obviously, toxic bosses. But another thing that they do is not just stealing credit for your good work, but a lot of times, and this is true when it comes to commission people, especially, my client will have built up a clientele, and the manager will come in and take those clients away from my client and move them on to someone who has done nothing to earn them. And that's a form of favoritism. And I have experience with that. Before I started working as a lawyer, I was in television, radio, and newspaper, and I had commissions that I would receive. And it was nothing for a manager to take my accounts and move them on to someone else. And that is so disheartening. I mean, that is literally taking money out of your pocket. And so that is certainly a form of lack of respect, but it's also stealing. And if that's happening, then it might be time to look elsewhere, because that's serious. And then, obviously, if your health is suffering, if you're dealing with headaches, anxiety, or depression tied to work, those are red flags that you cannot ignore. They don't just disappear, they're not going away. I'll tell you, as bad as things are right now, it's still true that better opportunities exist. If you're underpaid, or if recruiters are offering better roles, don't settle. You owe it to yourself to get out there and see what's available. You just never know. Especially, if you're good at what you do. And I find that I was talking about people who work on commission. If you do a really good job with that, you probably know about other opportunities. So don't be afraid to make a move. At the end of the day, if your job costs you your health, peace, or dignity, it's already too expensive. Don't wait until you're too broken to walk away. Start planning your next move now. And, as I always say, you should not be afraid to make a move, but don't quit without a plan. Because if you quit without a plan, and you're thinking about suing your employer after you quit, that's going to be a problem, because you tie your lawyer's hands in doing that. You're making the ultimate decision before the lawyer gets involved to negotiate an exit for you. At that point, there's no wrongful termination because they haven't terminated you. You quit. So never do that. But at the same time, never be afraid to move on without a plan. If you feel like you have a basis for suing your employer, just contact a lawyer before you leave, so that the lawyer can come in and negotiate an exit for you. So you can have another job lined up and still have a lawyer negotiate a severance for you. And so that is like the best of both worlds. So anyway, just take care of yourself. It's hard in these workplaces. I know that. It's what I see all day, every day. See you next shift.